Welcome to Soul Nutrition. I'm your host, Reina Rose. This past year and a half of the pandemic have been devastating for many. There have been stories of heartbreak and losing hope everywhere we look. But today I have Billboard-topping Christian music artist Tasha Layton with us to share her journey from despair to wonder as she looks at what God has done in her life and through her life for so many others. Tasha, it's such an honor to have you on the show today.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you here. So for the audience out there, I was at a worship leader conference in Nashville and I heard Tasha's songs and I am in the audience just weeping and and feeling the stories behind the songs, which she's going to share with us today. And since then, I forwarded these songs out to so many people struggling with suicidal ideations, people struggling with addiction. These songs actually speak to so much more than even just what you've shared. And I personally have driven around with like songs on repeat. I actually created like a little list of my favorite 3, and just I was driving and weeping and just feeling God heal those broken places as this music that pours from your soul into the hearts of others and really brings that healing that God has brought to you. So I want to talk about your releases from this year. I also definitely want to talk about Braveheart because that's one of the ones on that favorite playlist of mine. And but let's talk about your latest releases to start.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that I sometimes I drive around in my car and weep to the songs. I think God speaks to me as much as He's speaking to other people, and so I just I am so grateful for how God is using it and including in my life. So yeah, I just have a new release that's called "Look What You've Done," and it's really my life story. My life's testimony in a song, and just really excited about that. It came on K-Love today while I was driving my kids to preschool, and I teared up even though it's my song because God was totally speaking to me, and I was so grateful for where He has brought me from and what all He's done in my life and the years that I believed I couldn't experience freedom, and I did, and that has been so life-changing for me, and I wake up grateful about that every day.
That's incredible. And I shared with you at the conference that I have a friend who actually did jump off a bridge this year, and with everything going on. And so thankfully she did live, and I forwarded these songs to her, and she was touched by these songs as well. And that so tell us about your story of going to college. I know that you had been raised in church. You had become somewhat disillusioned with some of the divisions going on in church. Can you tell us what led to that for you? Because of course, a lot of people who are struggling with it today, it might be the pandemic or something going on in this moment. And you have a song about that too, and I can't wait to discuss it. But let's get into where this all started.
Well, it started because I grew up in a Christian home that loved God. They loved Jesus, and I experienced God's presence at an early age. So I became really passionate about God and knowing Scripture, and I was there every time the doors were open at church. I was there, and I wanted to be there. I wanted to experience. I felt at home. I felt like I belonged there for the first time in my life. I had really felt like I belonged somewhere, and so when I experienced some church hurt, and not just, oh, they said something about me, or kind of shallow offense. It was a deep wounding from Christian leader, and a situation that was just really painful. And so it was so painful that I walked away from the church, and didn't necessarily walk away from God. I needed to know truth. I needed to to experience something that was healing for me, because I was hurting so badly. And so I searched. I had changed my major. I was in college at that time, and changed my major from music to religion. I'm a music school dropout. Which is crazy. I'm only a few classes shy of a music major, but dropped out and
I think you're
changed
doing
my
all right.
major to religion. And I decided to seek out other religions, because I was like, I don't know that Christianity is it. I couldn't reconcile how Christians could be so cruel, to be honest.
Mm.
And so I went to mosque, I went to synagogue, I went to Buddhist meditation camp, I studied mysticism. I did everything that I could do to try to find truth. And I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if Jesus was it for me. And so it was a very hard journey. And it was hard to have that journey in the middle of being in a relationship with people who were very conservative, and maybe people for whom my questions were scary or intimidating or uncomfortable. And so I was very isolated, because I don't think people understood what I was trying to accomplish. And so at my lowest of lows, very, like I said, isolated and feeling very alone, and I tried to commit suicide. And at that lowest of low point, I realized I had kind of this intellectual transition, because I was very numb and I didn't feel much at that point. But in my mind, I thought, in all of these other religions, I'm having to strive to be good enough. I'm having to strive to reach God, to make sure all my P's and Q's are set, And I was like, but in Christianity, Jesus is in pursuit of us, Emmanuel, God with us. And there was something about that shifted my outlook. And I thought, if faith is like love, then sometimes you're not going to feel it. You're just going to walk it out like a decision. And so I decided to go back to church for a while. And I thought, at some point, this is going to stick. Like, even if I don't feel it, even if it's hard, even if I don't fully even believe a lot of what I'm hearing, I thought Jesus has been the only one out of all of the things that I've experienced in my life who's offered true transformation, true power to transform in my life, and true peace. And so I thought, I am going to go back, and at some point, like I said, it's going to stick. And sure enough, a year and a half later, the pastor said, if you want to touch from God, come up to the front after service and we're going to pray for you. And I was first one up, last one to leave. I was there for hours, sobbing mess on the floor. And that moment where God met me, we have these altar moments where we have these encounters with God, and we can look back and say, God, you met me there. Mm-hmm. You did. And so that was an altar moment for me. And it changed the trajectory of my life. I think, as much as I was wounded by people in the church, I was also healed by people in the church. God used the same thing that wounded me to heal me. And I think he often does that. He's a God of reconciliation and restoration. And, it's a kingdom of opposites. It's better to give than to receive. To gain your life, you have to lose it. First shall be last. Absolutely. And so forth. And so it was the very thing that wounded me that healed me. And so then I decided to go to seminary, and I really just wanted to serve God and help people. And I specifically felt a calling to help people who were seeking. And if that meant, doing music outside of the church, or because we, sometimes we think to be called and to fulfill your calling, you just have to work at a church your whole life. And I don't think I was open to the many, many ways that God uses us as believers to impact the world. And so I had a little bit of salt in the salt shaker syndrome, and I needed God to get me out of the salt shaker. And that's exactly what he did. So, so I went to California to seminary, and then lots of things happened after that.
Well, I want to touch on, this journey that you had, towards really finding truth. And one thing I mentioned in the book I wrote, I talk about those who seek will find. And,
Yeah.
people get very upset when you're bouncing around trying to find truth, right? Because sometimes even in church, with well-meaning people, truth can be distorted, right? And if we look
Yeah.
over the theology over the years, people use God to keep segregation happening. People
Totally.
use the Bible to say whatever they want. And so we
Yeah.
go on this journey to seek truth because maybe there's a lot of truth at the church that we're at, but there's more, there's deeper truth.
Yeah.
And that journey leads us back to Jesus every time. But
Yeah.
sometimes he takes us on this journey to show us here's all that there is out there so that you can know the fullness of my goodness and the fullness of my love and the fullness of my truth, and know, have a better barometer too in church when something feels, that doesn't feel like the Savior I know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because the enemy will often use a little bit of truth in the lie that he's accusing us of, or rooting in our lives. And so I think it's hard when you see so much good in both Christian and all kinds of religions. There are pieces of the truth, but I think in the end Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And it's not a set of externals or something that's subjective. It's a person. Truth is a person. And I think that was what was different for me. This idea of divine truth, that it's not my truth or your truth. He is the truth, the way, the truth, and the life.
Absolutely. And I love that you're coming back to he is the truth. He is the truth. And we seek Christ, and we don't have to worry about political party or denomination or any of these things that divide.
Yeah.
But in unity, we can say, I think it was St. Augustine, not St. Francis, who said, in the important things, unity, which are, there's a few important things, unity. And in the unimportant things,
non-essential.
grace, and the non-essentials, is the essentials unity, in the non-essentials, grace, and in all things like love and mercy, I think is what he said. I don't know the quote exactly, but there's so many things that divide us. And that was actually the unity was the theme of that conference we were at, as a body, as believers. But when we can come back to, all right, we believe Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, all the rest, we can say, that's not my truth at the moment, but it can be yours. And we all agree that we love Christ and we're seeking his face. And no pointing fingers at, because you don't believe this exact mission statement of our church, you're probably not saved or whatever. And I think that's what drives people away.
It's such a hard thing to not point the finger for so many people. I mean, even well-meaning, loving Christians end up pointing the finger, and I've never seen it happen the way that it's happening right now in our society, in our world. And I think it's ever more important to keep your eyes on Jesus and to not respond in the way that your flesh wants to respond. It's very important to be walking in the Spirit right now and to hear an internal higher perspective from God and having his ears and his eyes on things instead of what we believe or think, because it is very divisive, and we are living in the most divisive time I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And I think every day I've been praying, God, give me the response that you want me to have. Let me do what I see you doing, so to speak, like Jesus said in the New Testament. I do believe that more than ever we need to be slow to speak. Very slow to speak.
And I think we have to be very conscious too about what we let in those ear gates and eye gates, right? I love pointing people to the Netflix series or show, The Social Dilemma, you know, to
Oh,
remember that
yeah,
a lot of times we get in an echo chamber of conservative or liberal or, you know, this denomination or that being the only voice, right?
yeah,
And again, one thing I personally, I love to study theology through many centuries, right? And see what changes on the surface and what always remains the same,
yeah,
because we do see these
yeah,
politics change. We see the way that first century believers thought versus now was actually very, very different. You know, we see end times theology completely different in the last 100 years than we had through the
yeah,
centuries. And so, not saying that one is right or wrong, but just to know that these things change.
yeah,
And so to be so line in the sand, this is the only way to believe it, um, is something to question. And so I think these journeys, like you went on, and your journey led you to check out different religions, and it led you and brought you back to Christ, to have these times where, you know, like Jacob, we wrestle with God.
yeah,
What is this, God? Show. And I think it's a healthy thing to wrestle for those answers. And I think you said something in one of your interviews about, you know, God wasn't upset with your questions, and he wasn't upset with
yeah.
the pain that you went through.
He's not scared of it.
Mm-hmm.
He's not scared of it. He's not intimidated by it. And I think that another thing that we tend to do when people are questioning is, again, judge. And he's the
Mm-hmm.
only judge. And I think it's just as easy for the people who are within the church to judge those who are seeking as it is for those who are seeking to judge those in the church. And
Mm-hmm.
when someone seems very firm in their faith, people question that sometimes. And yet, I feel like we're living in a time when we need to be firm in our faith, and um, we need to stand on the word of God and believe what he says to believe instead of wavering, to hear him say, this is the way, walk in it. Don't turn to the right or to the left. This is
Mm-hmm.
not what I've called you to do, or this is what I've called you to do. Just being very mindful of, okay, I am a Christian. My life is not my own. I don't live by the same rules as the world. Even though a lot of these things are fads, a lot of stuff is happening around us that doesn't line up with the word of God, that I'm going to stand firm in who I am and who God is. And there's rest in that. I mean, Sabbath for the Hebrew people was stopping to remember who God was and who they
Mm-hmm.
were. And when we do that, confidence comes back where we might have lost it, because we
Mm-hmm.
remember his faithfulness and what he's done. And so, kind of to come full circle, the song "Look What You've Done" is really about taking that finger of shame that we point at
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, or the enemy
Mm-hmm.
points at us, of saying, look what you've done. You should be ashamed of yourself. And all those roots and the lies that the enemy, tries to plant in our hearts, and to say, God, no, you can dig these roots up and you can heal all of this and replace those lies with your truth. And looking at that and saying, gosh, God, look what you've done. Look what you've done. It's both a testimony of the past, but it also gives us faith for the future, that focusing on his faithfulness and stopping to remember who God is and who we are in him.
Absolutely. And your songs, you know, you speak a lot in your songs about those lies you once believed, and God pulling the roots up of the lies. And, you know, you were talking earlier about standing in the word, and knowing his voice. And we do need to be in our word and knowing the voice of God, becoming familiar, so that we can discern the lies and the truths. Because that's the
Mhm.
thing, is the enemy always used from the very beginning with Adam
Yeah.
and Eve. He uses that little bit of truth to plant a lie that's believable. And
Yeah.
you talked about identity and confidence, and I truly believe that the very first place Adam and Eve missed the mark, the first place that they sinned, was forgetting who they were. Because
Yeah.
centuries later, we would see Jesus say, "Get away from me, Satan. I am already God. I'm already," and they were just made in God's image. They didn't need to eat something to be like God. God just
Yeah.
breathed his very breath into them and made them like him. And so that lie that you aren't already like God, made in his
Yeah.
image, was, I think the first place we see them start to go off the rail before they've even eaten the fruit. And you talk about that so much in your songs, like not believing the lies, having the lies plucked out,
Yeah.
and uprooted from our lives. And I think that it's so important that we need to know the voice of God so that we can distinguish this is not the voice of God. This is.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't know what the lies are. Like you start to dig and you just realize that, oh, I don't actually know what all of the lies are. I just feel stuck in this area of my life. Or I don't understand why I get sad about certain things, or why I've struggled with depression or anxiety. And I feel like we're super over medicated these days in our country, in our world. I don't think there's anything wrong with medication. I think, let me disclaim that to say, I do not think there's anything wrong with medication. I think medication can help you function to be able to get to the root. But there's more work to be done than just band-aiding it. And so I think, sometimes you have to do a little bit of digging and let the Lord reveal what those lies are, because it's not as easy as just, okay, what do I believe about myself? Like psychologists say our systems are set before we're 5 or 6. And so a lot of the lies we believe as adults were even, put in motion before that period of our life. And so I think for me, I had to go through, everything that had ever hurt me. I had to get with a therapist and somebody who really knew what they were doing to help me get to the root. And then we allow that space to let the Lord heal it and let the Holy Spirit come into that place and say, okay, what do you want to say to me? And a beautiful example of that was I came home one day after school when I was really little and wanted to tell my dad about my day. And he had a hard day and kind of shut me off when I started to talk, and it hurt my feelings. And I thought, in that moment, that little subtle thing, I thought, oh, I'm not worth getting to know. Oh, okay. I feel hurt. I feel shame for speaking up right now. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to hide who I really am because I'm not worth getting to know. And I didn't realize that
right
was a lie for me until I kind of did some digging. And so because God stands outside of time, God was there when that happened, but he is still there. And so, because he created time. And so I allowed the Holy Spirit to take me back to those moments and say, God, when that happened, show me where you were in the room. And when I went through this process, I realized I just started to weep because I realized he was sitting right next to me at the table. And I let him know, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm believing about myself. And then he so gently said back to me, I really want to know who you are because I love who you are, because I made you, I created you. And it was like that word of truth straight from the horse's mouth took that lie, uprooted it, and planted something beautiful in a millisecond. I felt the truth move from my head to my heart finally. And so I'm really a proponent of kind of getting to the bottom of why you're feeling the way you're feeling and not shying away from your feelings. I feel like depression is just your body's way of saying that something needs to change and that you got to deal with something. And so I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. Sometimes we need to lean into it and say, okay, what does this mean for me? Like, what am I dealing with? What's the root of it?
And sometimes, like you mentioned, that's not something that we can do on our own, whether it's, we'll talk about a journal you have coming out here soon. But also, I want to destigmatize, especially in the Christian arena, going to therapy. I have a wonderful Christian therapist as well, who, prayerfully leads me through some of my own traumas the same way, like you were saying, going back to that moment where I believed a lie from the enemy and it affected years and years and years to come. And that if you don't pull those weeds out, they're going to grow up all around your fruitful life that could be fruitful and squelch it out. And so I think it's so important to recognize that we don't do this life alone. To find a good counselor or therapist or friend to go through a journal or book with and dig into these things is absolutely necessary. And it's not even a question. We've all gone through hurts. The enemy's planted lies in everyone's life and seeks to squelch out our fruitfulness with
Yeah.
these lies. And so it's so imperative that we make a conscious effort to, with someone else, in prayer, go through these things and dig out those roots with God. Because, there, I was listening to a pastor the other day talking about, God does miracles and he expects us to come alongside. It isn't just sitting around saying, God, work a miracle. It's, God, I'm here and I'm doing this with you. And we're together going to go pull these roots out, and I'm going to see what they are. And you're going to reveal things to me that will make me more fruitful for the rest of my life. So
and you touched on something that's really important, because we are created in his image. And God is 3 in 1. He could have chosen to be alone, but he didn't. He's in community with himself, and he created us to be in relationship too. And so I think the thing that I would say to anyone who is walking through figuring out those lies, or just depression, anxiety, and not sure what to do about it, is just to not go it alone, and to find someone who is trusted. And because some people are not going to steer you in the right direction. So just praying that God leads you to the right person. And if you go to someone and they're not helpful, find someone else. keep trying, because God will meet you where your efforts leave off in a beautiful way. And one thing that my mom said to me growing up that I've always carried with me, she said, you can't steer a car that's not moving. And so sometimes we have to keep moving for God to steer us in the right direction, to the right help, to the right resource. I went to years of therapy before I found the kind of counseling intensive place that I went to that was so impactful for me, and really changed everything. And so it took a while to get there, though. And more of my life has been characterized by pain than it has joy and freedom. And so, but I am here to say that for so many years, I did not think that I could be free. And I feel so free now, and I feel so full of joy now. So I know that it can happen for someone. And to have been at that point of, trying to take my life, and to see where I am now, only God could do that.
Absolutely. The lyrics, "Look what you've done," from that song just came blaring into my head as you spoke that. I want to also talk about Braveheart. That's not one of the new ones, or is it new? It's not on this last EP, but
it's fairly new. It was on the Look What You've Done EP. Yeah.
Oh, okay. It was with Into the Sea.
Yes. Oh no, Into the Sea was the one before that.
Okay, so
it's hard for me to keep it straight too.
I encourage everyone, go down and download all of them, because you're just going to find so many gems in there, and you're going to play them over and over. Probably not good on the way to a meeting, because you'll be crying, but you'll find the ones that you can cry to, and the ones that you can play on the way to your meetings that are just uplifting, and they're all uplifting, but some of them, they touch that deepest place in your heart. And I felt just years of pain melting away as I'm listening to these songs. And like you said, God does the same for you, even though it's your own song. I've had that experience in a song I wrote when I was 19. And I play it now and I think, I had no idea what this meant when I wrote this. This was not me, because it's still touching me. And I really didn't know what this meant at 19. So
songs are gifts.
They are gifts. They're gifts from God. And you can feel that as you listen to your songs. Braveheart, tell us the story. I mean, it's your life story. And oh no, Braveheart, tell us the story behind that one.
Yes. So Braveheart, I had a friend introduce me to a woman who had been trafficked when she was 4, and she was found when she was 34. The FBI said it was one of the worst cases they'd ever seen. And she wanted to take her life. And so my friend thought that it would be good for us to talk about some things together. And so I befriended her, and we chatted over months' time. And I was just so heartbroken by her story. And I walked into a writing session, and we were supposed to write one song, and we wrote another, because I couldn't stop thinking about her. And we had to write a song for her. And I left that day thinking, at some point it'd be really beautiful to send this to her and let her hear it. But I knew that the timing wasn't right, the demo wasn't ready, all of that. And so just decided to wait. And months went by, and our mutual friend reached out one day and asked if I had heard from her. And I said no. And he said, well, no one else has either. She's missing. And so she ended up missing for 3 days. We were praying that she would be found. And because she was beaten every day when she was trafficked, she has a lot of seizures. And she had a seizure in a basement and doing laundry, and no one found her for 3 days. And so long story short, she was in neuro ICU. They were ready to pull the plug. We had been praying for her, and I knew that it was time to send her the song. And so I was actually sick in bed. My husband was on tour, and I told my husband, Keith, I said, just send me the chords. I'm just going to do a quick voice memo with my guitar in the studio, and I'll just send it to the phone. And so we sent it along with a prayer that our small group had prayed over her, and she shed a tear. And the doctor said, in good conscience, I can't pull the plug. And so they kept playing the song over and over for her. And that night she woke up. So it was just an incredible, miraculous story. It's a medical miracle. And as you know, it's not the song that holds the power. It's not my songwriting abilities that hold the power. It's God's power. And it's so beautiful how he uses things that we create, because we're created in his image. And so God used it. And so I'm really proud of that song. I love that song, and it's written for someone who wants to give up. And so if you are feeling like giving up, I would say check out the song Braveheart.
Absolutely. That's one of those ones on my little list of repeat there. And the part where it says, you don't have to hold this. You can let the pieces fall down. I'm going to be right here with you. And that's that voice of God speaking through your song to everyone who just has too much, it's just too much in this moment in this life. Right.
And it's exhausting to try to do it all.
And I learned that one because I want to play it for a missions trip I'm going on tomorrow. And, there's times I'm like, I just can't get through it, because that release of knowing I don't have to hold this all. And God, I can let all the pieces fall, and he's right here with me. There's so much freedom in that. It's like the dam releasing and just allowing a freedom to flow that, okay, yes, we're wise. Yes, we make good decisions. We're good stewards and all of these things. And if we let the pieces fall, God's going to do wonderful things with that too.
Yeah. Sometimes we wonder, like, what's going to happen if I let go? What will happen? And sometimes we need to ask ourselves, okay, well, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what's the worst that could happen? Why do we try to maintain control so badly? And, I love the scripture, you, O Lord, are the lifter of my head. Because when we're downcast, when our souls are downcast, it's easy to kind of just look down and be downtrodden. And it says that he's the lifter of our head. He's not expecting us to have the strength to lift ourselves out of the pit. He's the one that lifts us out of the pit and sets our feet on a rock. And so I think it's easy to, in our humanity, to think that we have to do it, or that what's wrong with me that I can't pull it together, or what's wrong with me that these people over here look like they're having an easier life than me, or why is everything so hard, or why hasn't this happened in my life? God, have I done something to deserve this? Are you holding out on me? Are you withholding your best because I'm not good enough, or you think I'm evil, or, all of the lies? I could go down so many things that we think that are so wrong about God's character, about, theologically speaking, about ourselves. And it's just important to note that he's not asking us to do it in our own strength. It says, in our weakness, he is strong. And to let go let those pieces fall, like you said, and just allow him to carry it. There's a reason he says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, because it is. When he's doing it, man, it takes the weight off us. And it's exhausting to try to do it yourself and try to be your own protector. I think I've lived for years being my own protector because I couldn't let anyone know the real me, or I couldn't let anyone reject me. So I had to have all my stuff together and straight A's and achieving whatever I needed to achieve to make myself appear stronger than I actually was. And so yeah, I think just knowing he's not expecting you to do it all on your own.
Mm-hmm. You know, you were talking about we believe all these things, but we believe them because we're in a culture of hustle at all costs. We're in a culture of, you know, more, and nothing is ever enough. And you know, these are the voices that we hear day in and day out, the commercials we hear, the, you know, the self-improvement, which all of that is good in proper context, but we have forgot that Sabbath. You know, even when we look in the Bible, God created, you know, a Sabbath day every week, but he also created year of Jubilee. He created all kinds of feasts and festivals, all times to stop hustling so hard and just enjoy life and enjoy him. And when we get this out of order and we hustle and never enjoy life, we never rest into God, of course we're going to feel this heavy burden and not the yoke that is light, that is what he longs to give us.
I was talking with somebody last night, or maybe it was the night before. I can't remember because I'm a mom and my brain is mush. But I was talking with them and I said, you know I need a break when I'm in the line at Target and I just want to cry. And I'm like, it's been a long time since I've felt that way, but I remember those seasons of life where I just felt so overwhelmed. And I thought, I am running because I don't want to feel. I'm running and keeping myself busy so that I don't have to feel, and I don't let the things that I actually think catch up to me. What are you lying to yourself about? Is the question I started asking myself after that. Like, what am I lying to myself about? And what am I trying to run away from and keep from dealing with, or keep admitting because I'm sad about it and I don't want to feel? And so it's really important. I think, you know, for our culture, I think we've swung the pendulum a little bit as far as emotions, because our parents may have grown up, or my parents, I don't know how old everyone else is, but my parents were, I'm dating myself right now. My parents were kind of like, suck it up, don't feel, just get it done, you know. And then so my generation kind of grew up like super emo, you know, feeling too much and letting emotions drive their careers, you know, being paralyzed by fear of making the wrong decision. And they never did anything because they were just scared. And there's so many things. It's like, and I feel like now we're coming to this place where I feel like we're finding a healthy balance between emotion and just our understanding of ourselves and life. So I think it is really good. I love that you said that about taking the stigma away from going to therapy, because it's so important.
It is. And, you know, you mentioned earlier about being over medicated. Yes, some turn to medication, but some get overscheduled to avoid the feelings, you know? And so there's all kinds of ways we can self-medicate, and it's not always with a pill, you know, and sometimes it's just getting ourselves so busy so we don't have to feel, like you're saying, because the feeling can be scary. And I have to say, one of my closest mentors, I owned my first business when I was 19 years old, and it was a fitness business at the time, and it was slow because it was just the season when fitness businesses are slow. And I remember asking him, you know, what should I do? What should I do? And he goes, I think you should just enjoy this season. The busy season will come again. And I think you should, you know, you're not at risk of not paying the bills or something. If you can enjoy it, just do that. And God sent me actually in the last 2 years through another similar season where I've been doing things, but not, you know, having a full-time job. And there's, in our culture of hustle and what do you do as your self-definition, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm resting in God and just doing a few projects He's called me to. That doesn't seem to be an answer that suffices these days,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, but God does call us in seasons to rest because the busy season will come. And it's
Yeah.
funny, I feel that busy season starting to come with a bunch of projects, and I'm going, oh, I wish I would have rested a little bit more because I was resting and then anxious that I'm not allowed to rest, and then resting and then
Yeah.
anxious that I'm not allowed to rest because our culture just doesn't really allow for that.
Well, I think the older I get, the more I realize I need to lean into this right now. Cause like you said, like the busyness comes and I never
Hmm.
know, I've seen the Lord show me the ebb and flow of life. And looking in hindsight, I'm like, oh wow, no, I needed that time. And I heard Jen Johnson say something one time that I loved and it kind of stuck with me. She said, life is like rafting, like water rafting. She said, you have to paddle some, and then there are times when you coast and you just kind of go
Hmm.
downstream, and then there are times that you get out of the boat and you play and you swim. And she said you need all three. And
Yeah.
I think just as much as we need rest, we also need play and joy. And I think that's a piece that we often miss, because it takes effort. It takes effort to
Hmm.
be silly and to get over ourselves and go do
Yeah.
something fun, and it does take effort. And so,
And we
um,
have to give up what people think for a second
yeah,
and just enjoy. It
yeah.
didn't
And
take
for
effort when we were
me,
kids and we didn't care what people thought, right? Like little.
yeah. And for me, I've needed to like uh, keep my head from going to, oh my gosh, I need to clean the house before I can do this, or I have to get this done before I go
Ah,
spend time with friends, or I need to clean up the kitchen before I play a game with my kids or whatever. And I've had to just relinquish that and say, no, like you have to choose those things over other things. And um, so yeah, I think I still don't have that figured out. I feel like I'm gaining on it a little bit, but it's hard. It's hard because especially for someone who's like really driven, and I'm really driven because God has put a passion in my heart to see
mhm.
people set free. And so like it's a good calling, but sometimes we have to say no to good too.
Yes.
We have to say no to the things that are good because God has something more important for us to do. And so yeah, it's hard.
So I was thinking as you were speaking of that moment crying in Target, right? And you were an overloaded mom at that point, right?
No, this is
Not
I
yet.
I wasn't even married at that point. That's
Okay. Okay.
further back in history, yeah.
All right. Well, and so in these moments now as a mom, like I'm sure you have the tendency to get overwhelmed. And yet, tell us about what a gift it is to have this overwhelm and this mush of a mom brain
Yeah.
that you never thought you would be able to have.
So we have a beautiful story regarding our kids. And um, when my husband and I got married, my husband had known for 10 years that he couldn't have kids. And I had been told that I couldn't carry a child. I would need a surgery and shots and the whole thing. And so we talked about adoption when we got married. And then um, a little ways into our marriage, I just heard the Lord say, it will be a sign. And I knew that he meant we were to believe for a child. And so I was scared to tell my husband because he had already dealt with the grief of that for over 10 years.
Mm,
And he had always
mhm.
said, what would it say about God if he couldn't heal me? And what would it say about me if he wouldn't? Like, would I be a bad dad or, any so forth and so forth. And so I told him and he struggled with it for a few days, but then he came around and he said, I do believe that we're supposed to believe for a child. And so, um, anyway, that was January 1. And in the summer, we had a missions trip to Uganda coming up. And so we went to Uganda. I was leading a song called Miracles, and I looked to my right, and Keith is on the ground crying. And we'd had doctors tell us that his infertility most likely had to do with a back injury he sustained when he was a teenager. And it had been hurting really bad from all the travel in Africa. And so he came up to me and he said, I think God just healed my back. I'm warm all over and I can't get it to hurt. And so I said, we should tell everybody. And so then people, it's Africa, anything can
Yeah.
happen. He told, and people just started getting healed all over the room. And they prayed for us that night that we'd be able to have children. And we were pregnant with Levi 2 months later. And after we had Levi, which means set apart, he is set apart, we prayed again, and we were like, God, was that a one-off miracle here, or like, are we healed for good? And so we prayed again, and we had little Lila, and it's just been amazing. And we have such faith for families struggling with infertility. And we wouldn't have asked God for that in the way that we did if we hadn't kind of heard a word from him. Because we wanted to trust him with our outcome. We wanted to trust him with our future, and we still might adopt. Who knows? And so, it's been an amazing thing. And so I am very grateful. As hard as being a parent is, because it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. As hard as it is the most rewarding thing that I've ever experienced. And I feel very, very grateful for Mom Mush Brain. And my littlest is about 18 months. And so I think that I only have a year and a half or so left of Mom Brain. It's supposed to go from birth to maybe like 3 years old or something. So, so because my oldest is almost 4, I have literally had 4 years of Mom Brain. So I've got about a year and a half left, I think, and I will start remembering people's names and being able to communicate more clearly. It really is crazy. And I won't put my car keys in the fridge and not be able to find them. So yeah, we're really grateful.
Well, so we know the songs definitely come from God because they bypass that mom brain, right? And just flow.
Yeah. So it's the only way they could come is if God does it.
He's like, I can do this. Even that's how he shows it's God. Even with Mom Mush Brain that puts keys in the fridge, I can write songs that touch the heart of the globe. Yes. Yep. Yes. Well, so I definitely also want to talk about intimacy, because I think that's so prominent right now, and it was really written out of this time of pandemic, right? This time that
actually no. We wrote it before the pandemic. And I feel like this song is a lesson in just being faithful, because I walked into that writing session that day and I had not had a good morning. I didn't feel like writing. And you just trust that God is doing something, whether you feel it or not sometimes, and you're just faithful with what you have. And so I walk in, and I was pregnant when we wrote it with Lila, and just feeling kind of emotional. And I thought, well, I'm just going to focus on writing a song that would help people. And so I channeled a lot of dark nights of the soul when I was writing that song. And then we cut the demo that day, and the vocal you hear on the record and on the radio is actually the vocal from that day that we wrote it, that instant we wrote it, because I went to cut my final vocals and I was too pregnant. I couldn't sing. I couldn't breathe or hit any notes. It was crazy. But we wrote that song at the end of the summer, I think in 2019. And then we were planning on putting it out, but then the morning of when we released it, or a few weeks before we released it, my label, my manager, my husband, and me all woke up that morning and said, we have to work on getting this song out. And the pandemic had not fully hit yet, but because it takes a while for a song, you have to put it on play MP or whatever, and there's a lot to releasing a song. And so we just had a sense from God that we were supposed to release it, and the timing could not have been more impeccable, because it was God's timing. It was his choice, So we wouldn't have known that song was going to be released at a time when people needed those lyrics the most. So yeah, it was pretty crazy and humbling, because you realize, this is not me. I didn't decide to do this. God totally did this, and it's so much bigger than our team. So,
and yet you were faithful. You did the part that you're doing it with him, and letting him take your part and blow it up and give you the right words. Like you said, you weren't even feeling like writing a song. You were pregnant and not feeling good, and just being obedient anyway, and allowing God to pick up those pieces of, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. And creating something that is so powerful from this very moment that we were in, and you could have never known what was about to happen and how he would use this. And even, I've been listening to the song ever since the conference, and a few weeks now. And, at first it was just speaking to me personally as a, my own mountains being thrown into the sea and my own, like, all these things happening in life. And then, just the other day, there's fires going on in Turkey and California and Greece, and it feels like the world's on fire, right? It feels like tribulation times are literally happening upon our earth. And then I listened to the song again, and it was a fresh, and isn't that how God works sometimes? It's like he starts with our personal problems or personal miracles or personal little things, and then opens us up to the wider world of all his people and all their problems and all their miracles. And that it's not just me and my little things, but it's the whole world, and it's going to be okay, even if all the mountains are thrown into the sea, even if it's going to be okay.
And I love that, he never promises in scripture that we're going to have everything we want, or that life is going to be easy, or that all of our prayers are going to be answered in the way we want them to be. And so I really appreciate the bridge in the song, because it's not going to be okay because we're going to get everything we want, but it's going to be okay because of his presence from beginning to end. You're so close. You would never let me down, and you won't, in the valley and the shadow. And so I think it's important for people to remember that, he says tribulation will come, trials will come. And it's not that we're going to walk through that and it's going to end up the way we want it to be. It's just that he's not going to leave us. And that means that we're going to be okay, because he set eternity in our hearts. We're going to be okay for eternity, because we're going to be with him. So regardless of the outcome of cancer, car accident, financial ruin, all of these things, like, I could go down the list of stories that people have written me concerning the song. It's going to be okay because of him, because of his presence. He'll never leave us, and he'll never forsake us.
I was actually just in Kansas City, came back yesterday, and they have the Auschwitz Museum going on there right now.
Yeah.
And the stories of people in the gas chambers crying out, Adonai, Adonai. And, even though history, what happened, like going there and seeing all these images, hearing the people's, and then knowing that people were crying out to God, and it was not the answer they were looking for, obviously, right? And my heart was breaking, and I was praying and just asking God, like, speak to me in this, because this is hard to reconcile. And, and there was that eternally okay, and everything's not going to be sunshine and rainbows and beautiful and perfect every time, or life every time, in this life. But there's always that in Christ we have life forever, right? And and God did give me a piece about those people and their crying out to him in those last moments, and a complete knowing, I think sometimes we forget there's evil in the world too, right? Especially when we live, for the most part, if we're watching this in America, a relatively sheltered, safe life. We forget that there have been evils and atrocities that we need to remember in history, and that we need to have an eye out for in our own backyards as well, because they happen in these things. And so, and remembering that he's so close and he's so present with us, even in the worst trials and tribulations.
Yeah, you mentioned the journal that I'm writing, and it's really helping people walk through those traumas of, like, God, where were you when this happened to me? And because when we walk through those traumas, even if we're not admitting that we're asking that question, a lot of times we are asking, like, God, if you're good, then why did you let this happen? And
Mhm.
so I think it's the journal that I'm writing is helping people acknowledge, God, where were you when this happened? What do you want to say to me right now? How do you feel
Mhm.
about it? And it really does start to change our perspective on it when we know his thoughts, because it says his thoughts and his ways are so much higher than ours. Um, so yeah.
And it also helps, from what I've heard you say about it, to tune ourselves into that presence, to that voice of God, so that, as we walk through the trials of life, they will happen, there will be more, that we can walk in a greater peace, knowing He's there, He's present, and it may not make the physical aspect of it better, but we can walk in a peace and a faithfulness that um, exceeds all understanding.
Yeah.
So we just have a few minutes, and so I definitely want to talk about where people can find you, but I want to speak about how you use your music, journals, your social media, your everything, all of it, as a tool for leading people into deeper relationship with God, into truly seeking and finding His goodness. Um, can you speak just a little bit into that before we close out with where we can find you?
I think when I experienced the freedom of God replacing my own lies with his truth, I think I knew that I was vowing to help people find that freedom no matter what the cost. And it is the impetus for everything that I do, everything I'm writing, singing, the worship that I'm leading, anything that I do is trying to help people connect with him in a way where he can uh, free them as well. And um, I hope that when people hear my music, they can get that sense of that journey from brokenness to wholeness. And I love how David in the Psalms, he'll write the hardest words of how he's feeling and how terrible life is. And then there'll be a hope point where it turns it around and he says, but God, you are this, this, this. And I hope that people hear that in everything I'm putting out, that I'm speaking to the real life wounds and traumas, but also that there's a hope point and a God who cares about that and can bring you healing.
And that's exactly what I hear as I listen, and sometimes it's a breaking my heart back open to show me those things and
Mm,
heal them, right? Because like you
yeah,
said, we
that's
sometimes
good.
don't always know what it is. And
Yeah.
as I was listening to the songs and driving around weeping in my car, I
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily know what those things were that were falling
Yeah.
away, that were being broken open and melting away and being healed. But I could feel the lighting of my soul as I drove.
Yeah.
I could feel the burden I had accepted of lies on my shoulders, even though I can't specifically tell you what they are.
Yeah.
I could feel it lifting. And so, again, I'm
That's
encouraging anyone
beautiful.
watching this, yeah, go and download these songs, because you're going to want to make your playlist that you just listen to over and over, and allow, God to break open that part of your heart
Mm.
and heal it. I almost think of when I've gotten cycling accident and they have to scrape it off and pour the ointment on and re-heal it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like God like scraped off that old stuff, and so it doesn't get infected, right? And
Yeah.
put on healing ointment onto my soul as I'm listening to these songs. So, and where can everyone find you on social media? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, my website is just tashalayton.com. And I think Instagram, Facebook, all those are just Tasha Layton. And I try to keep everyone up to date on what's going on social. So yeah, and my story and my bio and when the journal's done, it'll be on there. But I love what you just said about the wounding and the breaking open of those places. I don't remember what it's called, but there's a type of Japanese pottery where they take the pot and they break it. And when they put it back together, they put it back together with gold and precious metals. And it's this beautiful, looks like art where it's been sealed with this beautiful thing. And they believe it's more beautiful than the perfect vessel or the whole vessel that it was before. And I love that imagery that you just said about God breaking it back open. But we serve a God who is a healer, and he cares. And so when he breaks it open, he's not leaving us to do it alone. And he's there with us, and he'll do it with care and love. So yeah, that's beautiful. I love that imagery.
Well, I love that imagery that you just explained of the pot as well, you know, and I was thinking too, it would also be stronger because of all the precious metal around the clay, right, than just a clay pot alone. And just there was a few lyrics from Thank You for the No that were popping up earlier. So I want to just mention that song in case, you know, we've mentioned a few songs here, but that one was important too. But that you're so close. You're so close. I just think of the precious metal wrapping around the clay parts, you know, and God just being in all our brokenness. And every time we have these shattered places and pieces, that more of his precious gold is just coming into those places. And so that's so beautiful. And again, that's Tasha Layton. Everybody follow tashalayton.com. Keep an eye out for that journal. We're thinking fall or winter, depending on how soon
fall
the
or
imagery.
winter. Yeah, it's on its way.
And so in the meantime, keep checking the website, but make sure you follow her on all the socials so that when it's ramping up and you can see it coming out, you're the first to know. Well, thank you all for watching. Thank you so much, Tasha, for coming on today. It's been a true joy and pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. We love just seeing the numbers increasing every month as you keep telling your friends and you're watching all the time. And until I see you again, may the Lord bless and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, and nourish your soul.